NBC News, Don Lemon pleads not guilty to Minnesota church protest charges. The former CNN anchor was inside a church on January 18th when protesters disrupted a service. A pastor there, demonstrators allege, worked for ICE, as if that justifies it, right? From St. Paul, Minnesota, journalist and former CNN anchor Don Lemon pleaded not guilty on Friday to charges connected to his coverage of protests over federal immigration enforcement in Minnesota. I mean, I love the fact that right off the bat they're taking a side, right? Like they're not saying that he was a participant. They're saying that he was covering it. So they're poisoning the well right off the bat. But NBC continues, during the brief, highly procedural hearing, Magistrate Judge Douglas L. Micco reminded Lemon of his constitutional rights and asked if he understood the charges against him. Lemon answered in the affirmative before the judge said he was free to travel unless he were to violate any state or federal laws. A prosecutor also revealed on Friday that authorities seized Lemon's phone during the arrest and have obtained a warrant so they can look into it. Now, that I think is the actual interesting part. Considering Lemon was, I mean, like I said earlier, he was, if you watch the videos, he was very much a participant, right? Mm-hmm. So he's going to use, obviously he's using the defense that, it's the First Amendment right to cover this stuff, et cetera. But he showed up with coffee for all the people that were the protesters. He was saying he continued to use the collective.
And to thank them.
Phrases. Yeah.
Thank you for your, what a bunch of warriors,
Yeah. Impressive.
Support the troops.
But I think that's the fact that they have the warrant for his phone is probably going to be some pretty damning evidence. I mean, what do you think?
I'm just saying, I don't want to see what's in that phone, man. If we know anything about Don Lemon, man, I don't want to see anything in that phone.
Don Stinky Fingers
Don
Lemon,
Stinky
right?
Fingers. Hey, but I don't know if you guys saw that video. Sergio, do we have that video? There's a video going around where there's a bunch of women, like fat liberal women, outside of his, where he's being, where whatever's happening in Minnesota, where he's there, and it's just fat liberal women waving around dildos.
Oh, really?
I know this is a family-friendly show, but I kid you not, this happened today, and
WNBA.
Don would be so proud.
And it's like, what are we doing here? It's just fat liberal women going around protesting. Remember your constitutional rights. Free the press, and they're waving around dildos.
Does he even have press credentials still?
I think he does. I think technically anyone that says that they're press nowadays kind of can be press.
Yeah.
Particularly when you're not going into a place where you have to get authorization from officials or what have you. And they certainly weren't looking for authorization from the church. They just stormed in and interrupted the service. And I mean, from what it looked like on the videos that I saw, they were intimidating parishioners, trying to scare people. Don Lemon made comments afterwards about how, he saw that people were intimidated and that was basically a good thing, or at least that's what he was alluding to.
I think he just had a crush on the pastor, dude. I wouldn't leave that guy alone.
He was a Chad. I mean, that pastor was pretty much a Chad, supported ICE, loved this country.
I believe he was an ICE. He worked for ICE, if I'm not mistaken.
Not the one he interviewed. It was a separate one.
A separate pastor.
A
From
separate
that church,
pastor
though,
was like,
or?
from that church.
Okay, so
supposedly.
That's why, by the way, I believe that church was targeted in particular because not that makes it right, but that's the reason why they targeted that church.
But I think it's such a bastardization of the First Amendment. I think the founders saw that the First Amendment was being used to justify a bunch of ICE protesters storming into a church and disrupting a church service. I think they'd be very, very disappointed. I can't speak for them, of course, but I think they are rolling in their graves because it is such a bastardization of what the First Amendment was there for. And it's like the gall of these people to say, oh, it's your First Amendment right to go in and storm a church while they're having a church service. It's nothing sacred anymore. It's insane.
Well, not only that, just storming in and interrupting, that violates the First Amendment rights of all the people that are in the church.
Yeah,
like people are forgetting about the fact that, the protection of religious services, or your right to express yourself, or to practice your religion, that's in the First Amendment as well. So that your desire to cover the protest or your right to protest does not trump your right to express yourself in your religious service.
Especially, it's a peaceful assembly. First Amendment protects your right to peaceful assembly. So if you trespass and scare people with a loud, raucous aggression, that's not really peaceful. So the idea is you're out on the street, you're not blocking, activity, and you're not scaring people.
Well, look, as a kid that grew up going to church multiple times a week, I would have loved if some protesters stormed in during one of my church services just to, mix things up a little bit, dude.
Destroy the monotony.
I really, just wake me up,
So I don't
Waiting
my
for this
toes.
moment your whole life.
Literally, dude.
Finally happened.
Yeah.
These churches, they're not a public place, so I don't think most reasonable people would think they're fair game for like First Amendment protests. But as far as the Don Lemon stuff goes, I don't know if it rises to the occasion of like collaboration or whatnot. I think what I saw was that he recorded them, knew about it ahead of time, which many journalists are tipped off ahead of time when protesters do stuff like this, both on the right and the left. And then the bringing the coffee thing, I don't know if that like rises to the occasion of collaboration. I still think Don Lemon's a piece of shit, and I still think he engaged in some harassment, and I think his goal was still to encourage the people there, but I think it's like a dangerous standard to try to achieve. I'm still old enough to remember when me and other reporters were covering the January 6th riot and inside the Capitol, and Elijah Schaffer in particular, I remember I believe he was in Nancy Pelosi's office even, but he wasn't charged with anything. Not that, and he shouldn't have been. And some journalists get some protections here. I think the punishment, the process is the punishment in this case with the DOJ going after Don Lemon. And that's the case for a few other cases that they have going on regarding Tish James. I think the process is the punishment. And same with James Comey. I think the process is the punishment. This is something Trump himself went through. So when he's throwing it back in the faces of these people, I don't think he really gives a shit.
What would you say to people that say things like, well, the law that he's being charged under protects people that are going to abortion clinics as well as people that are expressing, going to a religious service or whatever. And there have been a bunch of times where people have been arrested or the cops have said to people that are protesting abortion, move along, etc. If you get arrested for praying outside of an abortion clinic, I can't see how this wouldn't rise to the same level of offense. If he's going into the church, right? So if you're outside of an abortion clinic praying silently, right? Or talking to people, you say, oh, hey, do you really want to do this? Are you sure you want to have an abortion? If someone's going to do that and they're going to get arrested for that behavior, then I think that Don Lemon going into the church, I think that all the people that went into the church, I think that rises to the same level of intimidation.
I think the protest leader that led the people into the church is being charged. Also, I don't think people are pro-lifers. Kingman, maybe you could fact check me on this one. So far as the people outside of the abortion clinics, they don't get arrested. But I do think there was a group of people who went inside these abortion clinics, refused to leave. Those people were charged. The president eventually ended up pardoning them. That doesn't justify the stuff that goes on in the church, and the protesters who went into the church are being charged. But for example, do you think the pro-life activist media person who goes into the clinic with the protesters should also be arrested if they're just filming it, even if they do have an affinity for the pro-life groups?
Well, I don't think they should be arrested at all because I think they're saving babies, so they're doing a great job.
Sure.
Not that I encourage...
If abortion is legal and you're obstructing these healthcare facilities from providing that legal service.
I guess there's like that line where, okay, is it moral, but is it lawful? And there's a discussion to be had there for sure.
Because you're a big pro-life guy.
Yeah, I'm a huge anti-abortion guy. I think it's unjust. I think it is a modern-day genocide that many people look over just because the babies are small. But I do think that there have been cases of grandmas who are literally just praying peacefully outside of abortion clinics, and they were arrested by the Biden administration. And so it wasn't just only like super aggressive anti-abortion activists who go into the abortion clinics. Like, it's literally grandmas who are praying outside, of course, vocally, and they got arrested by the Biden administration.
Yeah, but what else were those grandmas doing? Those grandmas can be real problematic sometimes.
I don't want to butcher this story. I believe there was a pastor who went into
Grok says that there have been people have been arrested while positioned outside or near abortion clinics in the United States. These arrests are not for peacefully standing or praying silently without any additional action. Arrests typically stem from specific violations, physically blocking, trespassing on private property, which Don Lemon definitely did, disorderly conduct, which that is what Don Lemon has done, resisting arrest during protests, interfering with business operations. So essentially it boils down to there have been people that have been arrested when it comes to abortion under the same law. And so so because of that, I would say that what Don Lemon engaged in absolutely rises to the same level.
Even worse, I would say. Worse.
You could make the argument.
And it's like, I don't know how you wouldn't make the claim that he wasn't collaborating. I don't think you can make the claim he wasn't collaborating with them when he literally got them coffee and he was saying, we did this, hey, good job to them, and congratulating them, and he went with them. And the fact that, I'm sure you guys have seen the pictures of like the children crying and scared, and there's tons of stories that come out from the people who are actually there of, you know, these ICE protesters getting really violent, really in the faces of children, saying obscenities in their face, not letting them go anywhere. And
so I wonder, where is the line? Let's say I was the journalist who was tipped off about this event and decided I didn't bring coffee and I didn't say we while being there, but I then otherwise recorded everything going on. Should I be indicted for anything if that were the case?
Well, if you were literally a bystander just recording, right, as a journalist.
Well, I would be trespassing, right? Because I wouldn't have been welcome there, and probably, so at the very minimum, breaking the law of trespassing.
Well, I do think, intent matters too, and also that's proven in a court of law. But if you were just there to document what was going on, then yes, it's fine because it's just journalism. But clearly, Don Lemon had an agenda, I feel like, and it's just clear by all available evidence that he was proud to be there, and he was happy to be there, and he was happy to collaborate with these violent protesters and these agitators who went in and disrupted a church service. And so I think he should be arrested.
I understand your point a lot, but I think that the real facts on the ground, the fact that the government has prosecuted people for the FACE Act, that's the particular law that was broken, for things like inhibiting, trespassing, etc. That standard has already been set. And so when the FACE Act was passed, the inclusion of religious services and stuff, that was like a gimme to get Republicans to sign on, right? Like really they were focusing on abortion clinics. Yeah. That's why it was created. They were worried about conservatives and pro-life people protesting or talking to people as they go in and again, do you really want to do this, etc. And so they threw it in there to give a bone to conservatives, because nobody protests churches, unless it was unless it was like Scientology. I think they get protests sometimes, but otherwise, like for the most part, religious services were fairly benign, and most people didn't think it would ever come to anything. And so I think that because of the history with the FACE Act, I think that precedent has been set, and now I think it's incumbent on the Justice Department to actually follow through and prosecute these people. And I think Don Lemon has actually one of the people that made this a national story.
Yeah.
If he'd received the footage, like if these protesters had strapped on GoPros, they trespassed, they scared, they did whatever, and then they sent the footage to Don Lemon and he's like, I'm going to report on this, that's no crime there. But if you then, it's like a bank robbery, if you as the reporter participate with the robbers to go commit the crime and you're there with them inside the bank recording them, you've stepped over a line. You're not just reporting now, you're part of the process. And that's my take on it.
What if you're tipped off to potential criminal activity going on in the future? So these protesters will often tip off journalists to come cover their events. Do you think they're collaborators?
And the reporter has a duty to report that to law enforcement.
Okay, I don't think they do, and I think that would not. It wouldn't make them a journalist if they did.
Well, I mean, what depends on the law. I guess if it's a law that you think should be broken, you have a moral obligation to violate that law.
I mean, well, you don't know if a law is being broken. Protesters tell you, hey, we're organizing at XYZ and we plan to do something here. That's how they'll do it. And it's actually very common in the protest scene. That's why you'll always see photographers and you'll get a ton of footage of stuff because they tip off the journalists ahead of time. You don't know explicitly what's going to happen.
Don Lemon knew what was going to happen. That's part of the problem.
Did he know what the extent of what was going to happen?
He knew that they were going inside.
And like the fact that the thing he does immediately as he goes in isn't to document what's going on, ask the protesters why are they protesting. He goes straight to the pastor. Yeah. And so it's part of the scheme where you disrupt a church service and you go straight to the pastor while he's giving a sermon. It's like clear what his intent was.
And if the fact that he went straight to the pastor means that he was in communication with these protesters, because they ostensibly went there because the protester was allegedly working with ICE. Even if this guy wasn't the guy, if there was a different pastor that was working with ICE, Don Lemon went to the pastor because he knew that they were going there because someone was working with ICE.
So Don Lemon literally went with these protesters to agitate this pastor or a pastor who works at this church to find out who is this pastor who loves ICE, works with ICE, etc. And so I think it is very clear that he went with clear intent.
Yeah, and that's not even bringing up Don Lemon's personal politics, which are, of course, very, very progressive and very leftist. This is all stuff that we're talking about, just the facts on the ground. Never mind mentioning the fact that it's likely that he didn't agree with the religious people, and he agreed with the protesters. Like, that's something that may come up, particularly because, again, they have his phone, they have a warrant, they're going to look into it. And so if he was communicating with them and he knew to the extent that the protest was going to be, then again, this only adds to Don Lemon's problems.
Despite whatever fine details that we're going through, I don't think the DOJ will end up charging him. And bigger picture here, I think this is probably the best case scenario for Don Lemon, because he is a hero among his peers now. Oh, Donald Trump is coming after me. I'm fighting back against the Donald Trump DOJ. Amongst all his gay friends in Fire Island now, you know who's fighting back against the homophobe fascists in the White House? It's me, and they're coming after me, and I'm a gay icon now.
That same thing can be said about people that go to protest abortion clinics. You don't think that they?
I'm sorry, start from that from the beginning. I was clearing my throat.
But the same thing could be said for people that protest against abortion clinics. You think if someone goes to an abortion clinic and they're arrested, you don't think that they can be like, look, man, they're prosecuting me for my religious...
Because there's a couple of priests, Kingman, maybe you know their names specifically because it's escaping me, but it was these famous pro-life priests who would go around to these abortion clinics, go inside, end up getting arrested. And it was because they repeatedly did that. They eventually went to jail, Trump pardoned them. But even you, a pro-life advocate, I suspect you don't even know the name of these guys. I think we don't rally around the pro-life flag on the right as many on the left will rally around the anti-ICE messaging. And that's why I think he's becoming more of a hero. People on the right, people in our country don't really care about pro-life issues, and therefore they're less sympathetic to those breaking the law to bring attention to that issue, as opposed to ICE and immigration. People think they're totally justified in obstructing both, ICE officers and, even church services, so long as it justifies and makes them feel about the good about the cause that they're fighting for.
I think that because the left is more vocal about this kind of stuff, right? Particularly now because Donald Trump's in office, Roe versus Wade was recently overturned. I think that it's a hot button issue. I think that because Donald Trump is in office now, the focus on immigration and stuff like that's a big deal. But I think that there are probably conservative people tend to be just that, a little more conservative, and I think that people that are pro-life, whereas they won't go and be so boisterous about it, I think that they still will be like, oh, that was a good thing for him to do. And if you're talking about optics...
But Lemon's going to experience the Jimmy Kimmel effect on this. You're absolutely right. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel had no ratings. Then he gets canceled, taken off air, comes back and blowing it out of the water now. Same thing's going to happen with Don Lemon. You're right. He's a martyr for the cause at this point.
Is it consistent with Jimmy Kimmel, though? Because I know that when he came back, he had a big pop because he came back, but I don't think that his show had a resurgence or anything.
Well, he did have Don Lemon on, I think, right? Didn't he interview Don Lemon or something like that? Yeah. There you go.
I mean, people love a martyr, right? People love the martyr story.
Well, I feel like it depends heavily on the political issue and whether or not people think it's justified. On that spectrum, people decide whether or not the martyrdom is worth it and interesting.
Right. But I think there is... Whereas, yes, I don't want to make Don Lemon this martyr for this progressive cause, and he's fighting against the fascists and the evil Donald Trump. I do think that it is also incumbent on the Trump administration and the Trump DOJ to set a precedent to tell leftists and progressives, hey, we're not going to tolerate this. And the more that we acquiesce enforcing the law that is in place and punishing people who agitate and hurt people or firebomb buildings and things like that, the more that we acquiesce and say, okay, we're going to stick to decorum. Yeah. We don't want to, if we do it, imagine if they'll do it against us. Yeah. I just don't think we're in a place in America anymore where we can kind of stick to those utopian ideals and this vague abstractions of principles when they're literally killing us and they're shooting us and they're celebrating it and they're bombing us. And it's and nothing happens because, oh no, it's fascism to arrest these people. And so I think it is really incumbent on the Trump administration to say, no, we're going to have an end to this. And all your leftist antics, your violent agitations and all these things, we're not going to tolerate anymore. And we need more of that heavy hand for Trump to rule with the iron fist. They'll call him a fascist no matter what. No matter what he does, he's going to be a Nazi. He's going to be evil Hitler. So if they're going to call you that no matter what, the progressives are going to call you that no matter what. It is incumbent on Trump, I believe, and the DOJ to go and enact justice to protect those who are truly most vulnerable.
Does it matter if they fail to convict and are only able to indict these people?
Like, what do you mean? Like, doesn't matter? Like
Doesn't, like, again, he might not end up being convicted, but if he's indicted, he has to go through and charged. He needs to go through the entire process. If you're indicted, same again with James Comey, Tish James. If you're indicted, you still need to defend yourself, even if you aren't convicted.
Right.
And that process is the punishment, in many ways. So, I mean, it's not the way the criminal justice system was set up. It wasn't meant to be that, we're just indicting somebody and therefore you are guilty. You are innocent until proven guilty, but then you still need to hire a lawyer, go through the process, be stressed out about being investigated by the DOJ. All your shit's probably being stared at by, intelligence agencies and whatnot.
Right, but if the indictment's the point and there's no conviction, then what's the point? It's like
the process is the punishment.
Right, but it's still like political theater at the end of the day, and like I'm just kind of sick of political theater.
I think to your point, Elaad, if they fail to get a conviction, I think that people are going to look at the Trump administration as weak. I think that's already the kind of the base of the right wing. They're already upset with the Trump administration. They're not doing deportations fast enough. Trump's not doing this, not doing that. I think that if they fail to get a conviction, it's going to be actually bad for the administration.
Right,
So I wanted to follow. I'm sorry to interrupt. I wanted to follow up on the SAVE Act and get these specific details here because I think it's really pertinent to what we're talking about. So if I could please have 30 seconds to read this off. So a Catholic priest who blocked access to a Planned Parenthood abortion clinic could face up to 1 year in prison after being found guilty Monday of violating the FACE Act. On the morning of July 7th, 2022, Father Fidelis McKinsky, 52, a priest of a Church of Renewal, effectively shut down a Planned Parenthood in Greater New York in the town of Hempstead, according to the DOJ. He placed locks and chains on the gated entrance and covered some of them with glue, and that prevented anybody from getting through the gate and then accessing their pre-planned health care. Or not even all of these were for abortions. I believe he was convicted and then eventually pardoned. I know you're sympathetic to the pro-life cause. Despite that, do you think he should have been charged based on the actions that he took?
I mean, the reality is we live in a nation, and if we live in a nation with laws, we have to enforce those laws. I don't believe in lawlessness, and if we want to reform if we have unjust laws, then we need to repeal those laws. We can't have vigilantism and things.
Well, he'd be charged on this.
Right.
law.
So
and I just also think it wasn't just these guys standing outside. They may have been arrested, but the people who were charged outside of these Planned Parenthoods were doing more than just standing around and trying to talk to people who were going in. They were gluing and locking these doors shut.
Well, they were saving babies, but I'm not endorsing it. I'm not endorsing those methods.
No, but if you are sympathetic to that cause, then hypothetically, you would say those protests are justified. Again, people protest around the country all the time, and their actions, people, I feel like, view them as justified whether or not they're sympathetic to the cause.
Yeah, of course. But the difference is like we're right and they're wrong.
Totally.
So, and I guess that's why politics is so difficult in this country, because we don't operate from the same moral framework, not even like a semblance of a similar moral framework where the left wants to kill babies no matter what. The right is this amalgamation of different actions of like pro-choice, but not until birth, and then pro-life, and they're like really anti-abortion, and just like different people exist in the right wing, but the commonality among the right wing is that they love this country and they love America, whereas the left wants to like burn it all down. And so I think that's why it's very difficult to have any sort of political conversation in this country with those who disagree with us for right versus left. But also, I think it's very important then for us to understand why it's very, very dangerous for the left to get political power again. Because once they wield political power, they'll regardless of whether or not Don Lemon is convicted, they'll use his indictment, they'll use this whole process to say, we're going to go after Trump. And we're going to go after Trump supporters and conservatives and things like that. And so it is very important. This is where I don't really agree with a lot of the people on the right who are, the dissident right, who are like, oh, let's just let it all burn. Just let the Democrats win. Well, no, I don't want to see my fellow Christians and my fellow conservatives and my patriots locked up like they were in January 6th with like hundreds of grandmas in solitary confinement.
And to your point, like the way that the Democrats are positioning themselves now, if they were to like win, and like the dissident right says though, let them win, it'll get so bad, and then people will wake up, and then people will actually want to see something happen, a strong man come in. I don't think that that's a good idea, because the Democrats are positioning themselves where if they win, they're going to make it impossible for the right to ever win again. Yeah. Like whether it be by expanding the court and getting rid of the filibuster and adding states or what have gerrymandering or whatever. So there's representation there's no representation for conservatives in Congress. That's the goal of the left, is to get a permanent left-leaning majority in Washington D.C. and they've done it in They've done it in California.
Yep.
They've done it in Massachusetts. They've done it all over New England. So it's possible to do that for the whole country. And then it'll just be like, well, okay, it was cool when we had a chance, but because people decided, oh, well, we're blackpilling and we're mad that Donald Trump isn't doing enough stuff for us, we're just going to let it all burn down. And if you let it all burn down, it really is the end for the right. There is no coming back from what the Democrats are planning. You know,
I think unpopular opinion on that is don't even go after Don Lemon. Just go after the people who perpetrated this, right? Because you're just bringing more attention. It's the Barbara Streisand effect with Don Lemon at this point. You are creating a hero. Leave him alone. Just act like he doesn't exist, because realistically he doesn't, and just go after the protesters.
Yeah.
Get more bang for the buck on this.
I mean, they have arrested the two organizers and the woke farmer guy that was doing his best to actually intimidate people. So
Just let Don Lemon fade into the black. You know, no pun intended. Holy shit.
I think it's part of their own the lib mentality where they couldn't let it go. They had to go after Don too because he had a big name and the president was familiar with him. And he was like, no, we have to take him down too, and to their own detriment and to Lemon's benefit.
Yeah, you want to exercise prosecutorial discretion from time to time because, like you're saying, you have a nation of laws. If you don't enforce the laws, the nation kind of becomes a mockery of itself if it can't enforce laws. But if it can and it chooses not to, there are situations where, like what you were just saying, Davey, is like, yeah, maybe you don't like fan the flames. Maybe. But the thing is now this is also precedent. So if Lemon does this again, he'll get the book thrown at him like 20 years in prison kind of thing because it's already been like, bro, you did it once. Don't do it again. Don't support illegal trespassing and promote it to a million people. So I don't know if you could get away with like throwing the book at him the second time if you don't charge him the first time. So it's kind of like, look, we charged you once before. Obviously you can't. So I don't know. I was gonna say you can't charge him for the same crime twice, but if he does it again,
it's if he does it again at a different place, it's a different crime.
Yeah.
It's not. You know, someone can be charged for the same crime if they did another instance of it. Like if you murder someone and you get found not guilty for murdering,
it's not like
you murder another
murder
person,
charges
you're not going to be like, well, we can't charge him for murder anymore because he beat the first.
Yeah, but a stern talking to, you know, and then like, hey, if you do it again, seriously though, Don.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.